I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Bailey Belisario. I hope I said that correctly.
Yep, you did.
And I will let him introduce himself. And I, for one, am very excited to hear the program today. And thank you, Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. You can see my screen, correct, of the presentation? Okay, sounds good. Well, I guess we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to be here. I'm very thankful that I'm able to get this opportunity. And I'm not going to try to walk around the room or anything because I got to stay by the mic. But I again thank you for signing up for this course, and I hope that you do learn a lot out of it. So I'll start with who I am. So my name, like Judy said, is Bailey Belisario. I am from Cartersville, Georgia, originally. So I came to South Dakota in 2017, studying cyber operations at Dakota State University. 3 years later, I got my bachelor's in cyber operations, and then May of 2021, I got my master's degree in computer science, and then now I work for Dakota State as a research engineer. So a lot of the work I do pertains to cybersecurity and computer science work. It's very fun. I enjoy it a lot, but any of this type of stuff I don't do for my job. This is all from learning that I've done personally within my own free time, and I'm very passionate about the subject. So again, I thank you for signing up, and I hope you learn a lot today. So just to gauge the room, and for those online, you can definitely put in the chat anything you want, or raise your hand with the little emoji things. I think that we might have those, I'm not sure. But just wanted to gauge the room real quick. So who has heard of Bitcoin, blockchain technology, or cryptocurrencies? Okay.
I've even invested a bit.
You've invested a bit. Okay. Well, that's great. I do appreciate that, and it's awesome to me to actually see that a lot of you have at least heard of it. Okay. And my next question was, who owns Bitcoin? Does anybody? Okay. Yeah. One. Yeah. I mean, it's okay if you don't. I mean, that's definitely all right. Does anybody own any other type of digital assets or anything? Okay. Well, I don't blame you. It's a very hard topic to discuss because there's a lot to it. And personally, I mean, just from an investment standpoint, and none of this is financial advice, by the way. I'm not a licensed financial advisor. So for me, personally, I don't like to invest into things that I haven't researched myself, right? I've done a lot of extensive research into this subject, probably over the past 2.5 years, but I've known about it for much longer than that. But what I ask of you is for the next hour and a half, I just want you to throw away any opinion, any preconceived notion, or anything you've ever heard from the media about this type of stuff, or marketers about Bitcoin, blockchain technology, and cryptocurrencies, both from a positive and negative point of view. Today, I'm here to kind of help clear up any misconceptions and, at least in my eyes, promote the truth on this subject, my motivation, my story, and why I believe it is a crucially important concept and topic to listen to. So I'll start with what is my motivation. So one thing that may surprise some people of why I'm fascinated specifically by Bitcoin, at least, is I'm a Christian. So I'm thankful to the Lord for giving me this opportunity to share this amazing journey that I've been on and being able to study and discover what the Bible teaches about principles of sound money. And the most important thing to me is that people understand the gospel. But over the past few years, I have become very passionate about Bitcoin, and I've put in a numerous amount of time and effort to understand this subject because it is a lot. And in the simplest terms, I mean, I'm going to try to explain what this stuff is today. Our main topic is on Bitcoin today, at least, and we'll get into the other subject areas later on. I want to make it clear I'm not here to like make a profit or anything. I'm very thankful for the job I have. I make plenty of money that I'm thankful for, but I'm also not here to promote any type of scheme or scam that any type of marketer is benefiting from this blockchain technology or cryptocurrency industry. Because to me, a lot of it actually is misleading, and they don't have your best interest in mind a lot of times. So the reason I say that is because this is not rooted in just my opinion. This is rooted in the matter of the truth of mathematics, history and teachings of economics, the laws and limitations of nature, and technological facts of computer science, so much so that it's become a theological conviction for me after looking at money through a biblical lens. So throughout the class, over the 4 sessions, we're going to examine some misconceptions, the history of money and what money actually is, why Bitcoin was created, what Bitcoin is, and what implications of every other blockchain technology cryptocurrency project there is. I do this because personally I care for every single person on this planet, and I care to love my neighbor well. I view and use money in that way, and how we use and view money can affect others around us, even though you may not notice. Personally, I just want to say that I am a fallible man. I'm a human. I make errors, and when I live in error and I'm revealed the truth, I try to live in that truth. Throughout my journey of dabbling in cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, it's all led me to Bitcoin specifically, and I stand before you to share that journey with you. So, my journey overall, I first heard of Bitcoin, at least, in 2014. The price of Bitcoin was roughly about $500. I remember very clearly that I was a 16-year-old sitting at a smoothie shop job, and I remember I had a Amazon Fire TV stick that I could watch stuff just in my off time when I wasn't serving people. And there was a documentary called The Rise and Rise of Bitcoin that I saw just as one of the things I could watch on Amazon Prime. Now, I never did watch that, and I regret that because I've watched it since, and I think I could have learned a lot from it as a 16-year-old especially, earning a little bit amount of money at my job, but I only understood Bitcoin and anything else that was created during this time as some type of investment or stock type of deal. In 2017, I graduated high school, and during the summer before college, I started to dabble in trading and investing. And so it's kind of a funny thing that I mentioned Bitcoin to my parents roughly in the years of 2014 to 2016, around this price range of $500 to $1,000 or something. And I just remember I'm like, you know, one day I think this could go to like $10,000 or something, and totally basing this off of no knowledge of what it actually is, and let alone it did. In fact, it's gone all the way up to, I mean, today it's at $20,000 roughly, $19,000, but I've seen it go from December of 21 from $69,000 down back where it is now. But the price is something that I want us all to completely ignore because that's not what I care about. So in 2020, as I went through my cyber operations degree and I started my computer science master's degree, I had gained a lot of knowledge just in the field, and I became interested in trading and investing again because after the big run-up in 2017, 2018 of the cryptocurrency markets, I decided to just kind of step back, and I didn't really learn anything out of it. I just thought, I was like, oh, that's cool, I could make money or lose money. But I started trading stocks, making money in my off time with the money that I had on the side during my master's year. So In 2021, personally, I'm pretty open about this. I did make a lot of money, but I also lost a lot of money, um, mainly because I still was not looking at the aspect of what this technology even was. I was just looking at it from a trading point of view, and I understood barely anything about economics, or even just how the stock market worked. And so, to my demise, that got to me. So I was in the, I guess, the bull market, and then the whole entire crash of everything that happened last summer, and that took a toll on me because I mean I was left with a little bit of money before I started my job. Luckily, I had job security of knowing I was going to start my job in July last year, but I was living on roughly like $2,000 over the course of 3 or 4 months. And for me personally, I mean, that was just me buying like $1 meals and whatnot, and I made stupid decisions, right? But overall, it led me to wanting to understand this technology more. So I began to dive into an MIT course pertaining to blockchain technology presented by now the SEC Commissioner Gary Gensler. Through that, I learned a lot about the history of money, some basics of economics, and where he believed, at least, what Bitcoin was, and then other cryptocurrency technologies. And I learned a lot from that. It was definitely beneficial, but it brought me down this path of wanting to actually dive into this technology myself. So after I started my job, I started to learn about the programming language that's used on specifically Ethereum called Solidity, and also studying the cybersecurity aspects of blockchain technology, and just trying to research many different projects within the so-called Web3 or DeFi space. Now I'm going to be throwing out a lot of terms, and if you have any question on those terms, I can definitely try to explain that for you. But understand the most crucial part, I think, for me, last year, almost exactly 1 year ago, October 31st, my left lung collapsed, and I was put into the hospital for 15 days. And this was kind of I mean, I look back on it now, and I find it actually to be a very thankful moment in my life, mainly due to the fact that I was able to step back and analyze what I was actually doing with my time, and what I was trying to study, and what I was motivated by. A lot of this, I believed I was motivated by making a profit somehow, based on my research and the work that I put in. But soon enough, I luckily was able to find specifically this book called The Bitcoin Standard. And this is written by Saifedean Ammous. He's an Austrian, he's from Lebanon, I believe. And but he's an Austrian economist, formerly a mechanical engineer, that wrote a book over specifically economics, the history of money, and later on in the book, Bitcoin. But once I read this book, it changed my view of money and Bitcoin completely in a direction I never even thought of before. So luckily, after that, too, I found 2 amazing podcasts, because I found Bitcoin to be an incredible technology that I just was very fascinated by. And I found 2 podcasts, personally, one relating it to my faith, Bitcoin and the Bible. And that podcast is, I mean, even if you're a non-believer or anything, it's an amazing podcast. I thought it was just incredibly well done. And then currently one that still is going, Bitcoin Fundamentals by Preston Pysh. These 2 just really helped shape my view on what money was and how to study at least Bitcoin. So the journey for everybody, I just want to explain that by no means am I an expert in this field. I don't think you really can become an expert in something based over time. Roughly, it takes 10 years to become an expert in something. This has only been around since 2009. So really, I would say the true experts are really the people that have been there since the beginning. in 2009, but dealing with like original developers and whatnot. But it's a young technology and it's very early on. But I believe it is beneficial to understand what Bitcoin is first, so you can understand what other technologies are that have spun off of Bitcoin and blockchain technologies. Mainly because, to me, studying anything, it makes sense to start at the beginning. So we start with, what is Bitcoin? So to me, Bitcoin is one of the most exciting, interesting, disruptive, and important technological inventions since the dawn of the internet, and the most advanced form of money in human history. In the simplest terms, Bitcoin is digital money, but there's much more to it than just money. It is an invention of status with that of the internet and a political/social revolution in the making. Bitcoin is a technology that is a protocol, a currency, and an international payment network. And the most significant aspect of it, I believe, is that it is truly and completely decentralized. Bitcoin does not rely on banks, does not rely on governments, nation states, or businesses, corporations to work. This type of application of money has never been done before in all of human history. Now, this word decentralized, I just want to throw this out there. A lot of marketers and vendors use this term for any type of blockchain technology. But one thing I want you to keep in the back of your minds as we go out through this class is that decentralized and distributed systems are not the exact same thing. A lot of systems, I believe, that claim to be decentralized are truly just distributed, but still have a centralized authority over it. Okay, and we'll explain that later down the road in the class, but I just want to put that out there. So back to what is Bitcoin. When you think of money, you may think of euros, dollars, pesos, some form of paper money that we have used our entire lives. And that makes sense because, at least for the US dollar's sake, it's been around since 1913. But with Bitcoin, even without the intervention of a central intermediary, you can send and settle money instantly to anyone, anywhere in the world, completely borderless, without any permission, without censorship, securely, all with practically no fee. To date, the largest Bitcoin transaction ever recorded settled approximately $1.2 billion in Bitcoin for 73 cents within 10 minutes. If you're not able to grasp the magnitude of how disruptive that is, try doing that in Swift, try doing that in Visa, MasterCard, or any type of payment network, because it's not possible, and it will never be possible. So, what is the history of Bitcoin? On Halloween, October 31st, 2008, a person going by the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto published the white paper of Bitcoin titled Bitcoin, a Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System. So I will read a snippet of the introduction to this. Quote, "Commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trust third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weaknesses of the trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible, since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly to one another without the need of a trusted third party." And this is revolutionary because Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever this person is, nobody knows, found a way to create an entirely decentralized network that can agree with each other without the need of a central authority, allowing people to directly send peer-to-peer payments without routing through PayPal or Venmo or any type of bank. This problem Satoshi solved is a computer science problem called the Byzantine generals problem. This problem was discovered in computer science in the 1970s and published a paper on it in the 1980s and thought of to be an impossible problem to solve. When Satoshi came to the scene and published that he had solved this problem, he was ignored and laughed at by many other mathematicians, cryptographers, and what we call cypherpunks. On January 8th, 2009, Satoshi released Bitcoin version 0.1, and the network began. You had a question? Byzantine generals problem. Yes, it is a distributed computer science problem that Satoshi was the first to solve. So the interesting thing about Bitcoin is, as you start to learn about it, like I said, it's much more than just digital money. It is the concept of cryptography, politics, distributed systems, economics, and within all of those, it has subtopics. I'm thankful for Unchained Capital for providing this graph, but a lot of this pertains to many, many, many years of innovation and study within history, within how economics works, and really in the middle of it, game theory. So I also showed this graph. I know it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that with the inception of TCP/IP, the thing that makes the internet work today, all the way from 1974 to 2008, 2009, when Bitcoin launched, there have been technologies that have led up to this moment of Bitcoin's creation. It is not something that just appeared out of thin air. A lot of work went into this, and whoever Satoshi or a group of people being Satoshi were incredibly intelligent people. So one thing I like to tell people is that Bitcoin is objective. Bitcoin is not an organization, like I said, nor owned by anybody. It is a protocol that adheres to the principles of mathematics and has a defined set of rules that everyone must follow and agree on to be a participant in the network. Now, these rules pertaining, like, it's not some censorship type of rules. It's just basically saying, is your transaction valid? Are you trying to spend more than you actually have? And are you adhering to the verification of every participant in the network, allowing you to transact that node or that transaction? And the cool thing about that is that it makes it permissionless, because nobody can tell you that you can or cannot transact something. It is completely neutral. And through Satoshi's invention of Bitcoin, approximately every single 10 minutes, the decentralized network can reach this consensus with each other and agree on the state of the network, which transactions have occurred, and who has ownerships of those transactions. So in our current financial system, especially with dealing with credit, if you use a credit card, your transaction, one, can always be reversed, for one thing, but two, it's never truly settled for at least a month. So the fact that we're able to reach this global consensus within 10 minutes is an achievement, for sure, within financial systems. Every participant in the network verifies and agrees that each transaction is held accountable to the rules of the protocol, time-stamping them into a permanent, immutable ledger. So this is my main motivation for Bitcoin, and I like to explain why Bitcoin is important. In the United States, we have the luxury of participating in a system where we can create and access bank accounts with a lot of ease. I mean, we have a bank account pretty much in every corner of a city. And we can trade in the stock market, we can open credit cards, we can easily get debit cards, any of this type of stuff, and transfer money with third-party applications like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, and have financial freedom unlike any other country in the world. Approximately 2 billion people in the world have access to these systems that we have, while the other 6 billion do not. Almost 5.5 billion in the world have access to the internet, and with technologies such as Starlink and other advanced satellite technology, it is expected that the entire Earth will have access to the internet as a human right. Many of these people who do not have access to these systems live in oppressive regimes and dictatorships. Many live in purely cash societies. There is no sense of credit, and this doesn't allow people to truly interact with something like the stock market or any type of international trade. Some may have access to physically go to a bank, but the risk is you can travel hours and trekking dangerous roads just to receive money from a family member in the United States, sending money to someone in, say, Argentina. And even worse, many countries and their police systems are very corrupt, and they allow thieves to operate outside of these banks where people are trying to just withdraw money, and they threaten these people with harm if they don't receive a cut of what was withdrawn from the account. So let's put this into perspective. If I want to send money to someone in Argentina, how would I do that currently? Well, I can go through a bank such as Western Union that allows me to internationally exchange currency in, say, Argentinian pesos versus the US dollar. So for one, I have to pay what the exchange rate of that is. So there's going to be some fee there. Two, just to transact from one Western Union bank in the United States to one in Argentina, it's also going to be a fee. And then alongside that, say I'm traveling to this bank and I'm trying to withdraw it, and I'm being threatened if I don't give some robbers some money that they'll beat me up or possibly kill me, then I'm also taking a cut away from that. So within, say, a $100 transaction that I'm sending from the United States to a family member in Argentina, they may be only receiving $90 or $80. I don't know. I mean, it could be any type of cut from that amount. But the beautiful thing is that with Bitcoin, I can do that now instantly and settled either within 10 minutes or just instantly, literally. And that's such a cool thing to think about, especially the fact that the time it takes to do that versus in the Western Union world or traditional finance system, it could take, even though they say 4 to 5 business days, it could take possibly like months to get that money transferred. So the amazing reality of the technology is the fact of the technology we've created today is the fact that almost every single person on this earth has one of these, a smartphone of some kind. There are roughly estimated that the 91% of people in the world have access to a smartphone of some sort. And then along with the power of the internet, I mean, it's just as simple as downloading an application on your phone to be able to transact with Bitcoin. Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I need to go back a little bit. Is there actually a coin?
No.
There is no coin. That's
No.
just something that's. So how do they know how much Bitcoin I have
Sure.
when you're making a transaction?
Sure. So this is where Bitcoin's blockchain comes in. What I was talking about earlier with an immutable ledger. So Bitcoin and its technology is not just a blockchain. You have many types of different technologies coming together to produce just Bitcoin, right? But within this ledger, for an example, I'll actually show you an example of it. There are explorers that Bitcoin is public, so I mean anybody can go and see any type of block on Bitcoin. Now I know this is confusing, but understand within a block, every single transaction that is committed on the network is recorded within these blocks. And we'll get into what a block is and what a transaction exactly is. But with Bitcoin's technology of proof of work, it records these transactions permanently into this ledger. The reason you know you have ownership over that is due to the participants in the network verifying that you hold the the right to that. We'll get into exactly what that is later on in the course, because from a technical standpoint, it's more than that. But this is how ownership is tracked. It's all tracked in a database called the blockchain. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess, is it just, basically, you're just owning part of the Ethereum, you're just, got a piece of that. but
Sure,
You
you
don't
just-
know how much, or, I mean, it's.
Yeah,
a little
I mean,
confusing, yeah.
you definitely always know how much you have because you're.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, the question. Would you mind repeating it again?
Well, I said, well, how would you know how much of you're basically just owning ether,
Sure.
space? And
Yeah.
how do you know how much you have? And can somebody just tell you that you got this much, or how do you really know how much you have?
Sure. Yeah, so the question was, how do you know how much of this digital asset you have? This comes down to a concept of cryptography and the mathematical principles of cryptography. We'll discuss this once we get into wallets, what a wallet actually is. But sorry, just hit the mic. You have a public key, and imagine your public key is like your mailing address. Every single person in the world can verify that your public key has X amount of Bitcoin. That is how it is proven, is with these special mathematical numbers. And I'll get into that like probably in our third lesson or third session. But overall, it's all based on math, that everybody knows exactly who owns what and where that Bitcoin lives. And it's not physical at all. Like all I have to do is just download an app, and then I can have full ownership over it right there. Question for you.
Yeah, trying to simplify this because we work in a world where we deal with dollar bills.
Correct.
If I own Bitcoin,
Yes.
it's in my wallet.
Correct.
I can tell how much I got in terms of Bitcoin.
Correct.
If I want to send money to Argentina to relatives, like your example,
Mm-hmm.
they have to have Bitcoin in order to access that, right?
So the question was,
Or get the app.
sure, right. The question was, say I had Bitcoin, and I'm trying to send it to somebody else in the world, basically. They have to have Bitcoin or be able to access it somehow. I will say they don't have to have Bitcoin, the currency, but they need to be able to access Bitcoin, the protocol. Now, the cool thing is you don't necessarily have to be connected to the internet at all. If there is some possible way that somebody can, if I'm able to get my mailing address to you, in this case, from Argentina, you can send it to that address from anywhere in the world as long as you have access to the internet yourself, and that Bitcoin will be transacted on the ledger and you will have full ownership of that, or at least the Argentinian person.
I'm losing though from the iPhone app.
Yep.
To the physical address in Argentina.
It's not physical. I was using that as a metaphor. So the address is a generated Bitcoin address. I was using that as a metaphor for like if we're in cash society, right?
Okay.
If
I'm
I
in
had your mailing
Argentina.
address.
I'm in Argentina.
Yep.
And I have to pay my rent
Mm-hmm.
to somebody who, wants Argentine dollars.
Yep. Yep.
How do I get there?
Sure. Yeah. So the question is, so you're asking if I have Bitcoin and I want to pay my rent, say in pesos in Argentina, right? Well, there's a few ways you can do it. One, let's say it's a local economy of Bitcoin, which has been done, and it's,
Some have.
yep, you can transact just in Bitcoin.
Right.
Two, there are Bitcoin ATMs, at least in Argentina's sake. You can definitely pull out pesos from the Bitcoin ATM. And what those do is you send the Bitcoin to the ATM and it spits out cash. In the other case, you would likely have to do it through some exchange. So I don't like to go that route personally because it's a privacy issue, but we'll discuss that. But overall, that would be the way to do it. So does that answer your question?
I think so, but it seems to me that's more complicated than our current system of handing dollars and checks and stuff.
Sure. And that it makes sense, yeah. Yes.
So basically, the way this works, the best of both parties have Bitcoin. Otherwise, you have to,
Right.
there is some outside source that exchanges it for money, what we use now is cash
Mhm.
from Bitcoin.
Yes.
So you really want everybody to be on Bitcoin.
Correct, yes. The question was, it works best when everybody is using Bitcoin. Yes, 100%.
Is the value of your Bitcoin wallet connected to what the Bitcoin is being traded up and down every day? Is it gonna drop, my wallet's gonna drop, or?
In dollar terms, yes. So the question was, the Bitcoin that I have in my wallet, is it going to fluctuate in price based on what I have in my wallet and what the markets are trading at?
Right.
Yes, it will, based in dollar terms, but your Bitcoin amount never changes. So
Okay.
I guess one concept I want to get through to you is the fact that Bitcoin is trying to replace all money in the world. There's not going to be a such thing as a US dollar, pesos, euros, any of this type of stuff. And I think that's very hard for all of us to wrap our minds around, mainly due to the fact that nobody has ever grown up in the system beforehand of fiat money that we're currently in. Now, some of you maybe in 1971 lived under a partial gold standard where your US dollar actually could be traded in for gold. However, that's not the case anymore. The US dollar is not backed by gold. In fact, it's more based on oil, but we'll get into that in our second lesson next week. But it's very hard for us to wrap our minds around, okay, we're using this cash, or a lot of money that we use today actually is digital. Like, the money in your bank account is not cash. It's just a number on a screen in a database, right? Now, the funny thing is that if you actually try to go take that money out, the bank can actually refuse to do that. They don't have to give you your money. And this has been the case in certain times, and I'll explain examples once we keep going through. But the next concept that I want to explain is that Bitcoin is the money of the people. It's a truly revolutionary technology, and the reason that is because we can connect billions of people in the globe to a unified standard of money and have a productive global economy based on that like never before. The most recent time in history that we've ever seen something like that is when we were on a true gold standard. And I would say that was roughly basically from Egyptian times to pre-1800s. And we'll get into the history of money next week, but we haven't been able to be on a unified global standard like that in a long time. And currently today, the US dollar is the global reserve currency of the world. But due to that, there's a lot of economic mishaps, and I'll be explaining a lot of that. But so the thing is about Bitcoin, the reason I say it's money for the people is mainly the fact that there is no such thing as a social security number. There's no such thing as an email, cell phone number, who you are, what you do, what your political beliefs are, any of this type of stuff. You can participate in it and transact in it, and nobody's going to stop you. This is very competitive to things like Visa, MasterCard, SWIFT, and central banks all around the globe. It is honestly, from my point of view, as I've studied Bitcoin and just money itself, it has showed a lot of the flaws in the corruption of our current system that we have, exploiting countries around the world. So you'll notice, if you pay attention to media a lot, that corporations and banks such as JP Morgan, are very not fond of Bitcoin or not fond of these digital assets or currencies. And there's a reason why, right? Because they control the system and they don't want to let go of that control. But the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that they can't stop it. There's nothing they can do to stop it. Even if you gathered multiple nation states to try and stop it and ban it and make it illegal, you cannot stop it. It is already running, and as long as there is one computer running Bitcoin's code, Bitcoin survives. It is already being adopted across the world. Millions and millions of users are beginning to use Bitcoin. It is the fastest growing technology or at least participants in the technology since the internet. And on September 7th of 2021, El Salvador became the first country in the world to adopt it as legal tender. Now, Bitcoin's price in US dollar terms was, I think, roughly around $40,000. Now it's, around 19. So El Salvador is in the hole, right? But they don't necessarily care. They actually keep buying Bitcoin. And this is mainly due to the fact that once you understand Bitcoin, when you think of it in dollar terms, it doesn't matter anymore because you care about the technology behind it and the fact that El Salvador can now trade globally without any type of censorship from governments from around the globe. They can trade with anybody they want. On April 27th of 2022, the Central African Republic became the second country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. And in my eyes, I do believe that third world countries will be the first to adopt this. The reason I say first world countries won't, G7 countries, is because we won't realize the need for it until we actually need it. A great example of this actually happened in Canada earlier this year. There was a trucker convoy, and this, not getting political here, but this was just what they were standing for. They were standing for their political beliefs against Justin Trudeau. And this trucker convoy trucked all the way to, I think, Toronto? Yeah, Toronto. And Justin Trudeau enacted, the first time ever in Canada's history, the Emergency Powers Act, where they were basically allowed to suspend and freeze and take any money out of any person that was involved with that trucker convoy and get rid of their bank accounts, or at least freeze them. Now, that was a government that did that, and a significant government. I mean, we're talking Canada, right? Just based on a political belief that somebody had that went against the government's ideals, that any type of money that they had was frozen and they could not transact their wealth. To me, that is unfair. That's unjust. Nobody should have control over your store of wealth, right? Because you've earned that. That is something you've worked for. So within that, like I said, Bitcoin has neutral property. One of the most important properties of the internet is that it is neutral. Nobody controls the internet. I mean, you have internet service providers that, give us access to routing and whatnot, but nobody has global authority over the internet. It is technology that enabled freedom and allowed anybody to be able to post any type of free speech that they wanted on the internet. Bitcoin is also neutral, giving anybody the ability to operate with equal opportunity financially. And honestly, I've seen plenty of times, I get this argument, that Bitcoin is used by criminals, Bitcoin's used by, bad people, all this type of stuff. Well, so is the internet, especially in the early days in 1991, when the internet was in its first breaking stages, where, yes, there was a lot of bad things happening. But if anything, I would agree that the internet has done a lot more good than it has bad. And even though there are definitely certain things pertaining to privacy nowadays that we can stand for and argue against, I still believe that the internet gives a power to people like no other technology has, because anybody can put anything they want on the internet. Now, this is the same thing with Bitcoin. I believe there are actually way more honest people using Bitcoin, especially in countries like China, where currently they are being thwarted by a dictatorship and told that their digital currency that they have instituted, you have to transact it in X amount of days or you lose it, right? Whereas Bitcoin, if they are able to store that value in Bitcoin somehow in some way, and they can't be caught with that if they're careful about it, then people in China, even though it's banned, still transact in Bitcoin locally. And that is a power over any type of nation state that is incredible to me, at least. And it's just hard to realize that because we don't live in that world. We don't live in a world where, we're censored by a government or any type of regimen at all. And we have the US dollar. We are the global reserve. We have all authority, right? Yes, question.
So if I'm a Chinese citizen living in China, the internet is highly censored by the Chinese government. How do I get around that in order to access my Bitcoin
Sure.
on my phone or whatever device I have?
So the question was that if I'm a Chinese citizen, the internet is very highly regulated and censored in China, and this is true. They have actually created their own internet. However, the beautiful thing is that there is the same exact network that was designed for the dark web, which Bitcoin actually uses, called Tor. Bitcoin operates over the public internet, and it also operates over this Tor network as well. In China, you can spin up any type of computer that runs this program and is able to actually reach out through communications based on the entrances and exits of the internet in China, because they do still have a way to get out of it, whether this is through Tor or through VPN services. So VPN is virtual private network. You can transact your Bitcoin that way. So the cool part of that, and personally the reason I know this is because I've back in high school, I had a friend that was from China who visited there pretty often, and he was actually more wealthy, so he was able to come to the United States and study school here. But he did describe to me that even though China does all their censorship stuff, it's not really what they say. And that's the fact about China. You can't trust anything they say because anything that comes out of there can be a completely false statement. Now, in my own cybersecurity research, I would say that's definitely true. There's plenty of ways to access things in China or access the internet outside of or inside of China. And like I said, the internet is a very powerful tool. It's freedom. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah. So with Bitcoin, though, speaking of criminal activity, yes, in the early days of Bitcoin was used a lot by criminals and whatnot. And today, the main thing that you see Bitcoin being used for is ransomware attacks. Now, the interesting thing about Bitcoin is it is not fully anonymous. And what I mean by that is the fact that if you tie your identity somehow to certain, say your wallet in Bitcoin, then it's very easy for anybody to track. I would classify Bitcoin as pseudonymous, where as long as you are careful about your privacy with it, nobody can know who you are when you're transacting. And due to that, many criminals have actually been caught because they've tied their social security number to an exchange address, or exchanges themselves report things to the government because they have to be regulated. But for my case, personally, I don't like to even report any of that. And all of the Bitcoin I own because all of it lives privately, and I'm able to freely transact my Bitcoin without anybody knowing that it is me. Now, we'll get into privacy talk later on, but understand it is not a fully anonymous activity. But then again, I mean, it's not gonna, nobody can steal your Bitcoin or anything either. So I would say that that's not an issue. So let's see. For me, I would recommend at least going over how can you even get started in Bitcoin. And like I said, I'm not a financial advisor or anything. I'm not here to promote that you should buy Bitcoin. I don't care what you do. You have the liberty to do what you want to do. That's the beauty of Bitcoin too, is that you can opt in or opt out. Doesn't matter. But you can buy Bitcoin from some regulated exchange. Some popular exchanges are such as Coinbase, Kraken, Strike was a popular one that I would use. Cash App, you can even buy Bitcoin on. PayPal, any of that type of stuff. There's plenty of avenues, and even so much so that even 401ks are coming into the realm, and so are Roth IRAs. So Fidelity is a huge investment company. They will be offering Bitcoin to their clients. I don't know if that has already started or not, but that's kind of a really cool thing about it is companies like Grayscale, BlackRock even have looked into this as some type of way to allow people to invest their money into Bitcoin. Now, I would say a lot of people investing in that sense are doing it more so for the price sake, that they believe it's going to go up and they're going to earn money. And if you want to do that, that's okay. That's on you. But I'm here to teach what Bitcoin really is and how you can even protect it from people that want to put Bitcoin in 401ks, Roth IRAs, because you won't truly own the Bitcoin then, or even through exchanges. So the best way to get involved is finding a service or product that you are able to actually sell, and then someone with Bitcoin is willing to buy it. Personally, I've bought things with Bitcoin. It is entirely possible. For myself, I have a website, and I can go offer a product on my website. I can post an article on my website, and cool thing is with Bitcoin is that for someone to possibly even read my article or buy my product, I can definitely offer them to buy it in Bitcoin, and then I can earn the Bitcoin not off of an exchange tying it to my Social Security or any type of stuff like that. I'm earning it from another person peer to peer. And all this happens instantly, internationally. So that's really, I would say, the best way to get into it. But also, someone like me, if you were willing today, after this class session, for someone like me to give you Bitcoin, just to show you how it actually works, because I believe it's easier to learn something by actually doing it or using it. So
Free samples?
yes, it's free samples. Yeah, I am 100% willing to actually help you download an application on your phone and show you how to actually use Bitcoin, and I'll be able to transact that to you instantly, and none of you have to provide any personal information at all. So,
Aren't there other coins besides Bitcoin?
yes, there are.
So how do you take those? Can you trade those for Bitcoins?
Mm-hmm.
Are they interface with each other okay? I mean, if I'm using
Yeah.
CryptoCoin or something like CryptoCoin or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
Can I trade with the Bitcoin people?
Sure. So the question was, with Bitcoin, there are also other cryptocurrencies that are around. I refer to these as altcoins. Can you trade those altcoins into Bitcoin? Can you interact with Bitcoin with that stuff? Are those people able to transact with each other? The answer is, in an exchange, yes. I could totally swap my asset of Ethereum in a case, or Algorand or any type of other cryptocurrency there is for Bitcoin. Can I actually interact with Bitcoin's network with the other currencies? No, that is not possible. The reason that is because Bitcoin is its own protocol, and we will get into other cryptocurrencies, like I said, later in the course, but you have to follow the rules of Bitcoin to be able to transact in Bitcoin. Yes, question.
Can you clarify for me, do you own Bitcoin or have you transacted in Bitcoin? May I ask that?
Yes, yeah. So the question was, do I own Bitcoin or have I transacted in Bitcoin? Yes, 98% of my wealth is in Bitcoin. I own no retirement accounts. I have no cash. I live on credit. And every time I get a paycheck, I pay off that credit card and I use the rest to pay rent or other bills that I need. The rest of it goes into Bitcoin.
I mean, you can go through like Ameritrade or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Fidelity soon,
Sure, yep.
and you can buy, you can go use a service called like Grayscale would be
Mhm.
called the service, right?
Yes, correct.
And, you can buy, Bitcoin without knowing much of anything about it. I mean, you can just buy it by signing on to your financial institute on
Mm-hmm.
the internet.
Yes. So what June was saying was that you can buy Bitcoin from many different places nowadays. It's become way easier than it was back in 2017. I will say that. What we are going to get into, especially with my personal protection over people for this, is the fact that I don't recommend buying it through exchanges or anything because you don't truly own it ever. So what I mean by that is, for an example, there was an exchange earlier this year, and you can look into history of Mt. Gox as well in 2014, but there was also an exchange earlier this year called Celsius. Celsius went bankrupt. They did a lot of really bad things in their back end, but obviously they're not going to tell you those things, what they're doing. So my understanding is that all of the assets that they had, that people had given their money, put their money into this exchange, they were actually lending it out and trying to earn interest on that money by lending. Eventually, it got to a point where they were never able to really get that money back. Because the thing is with at least cryptocurrencies, it's not like the traditional finance system where I can, get a loan and then that money is given to me, whatever, and realistically in the traditional finance system, you can just kind of print money and out of thin air and it's okay. And a lot of this is through what we call the fractional reserve banking. But with cryptocurrency, at least, you are giving full ownership of all of that completely over to somebody, and you can't just take it back. So with anybody that was a Celsius user, having their coins all on this exchange, they suspended all of the services of Celsius, and all of these people lost money. And it's kind of ironic, but somebody created a leaderboard for how much money people lost, and people could publicly disclose their name and the amount that they lost. And I've seen up to $45 million, all the way down to $1. But this is a risk that you're taking, giving up the ownership of your digital assets if you're trusting an exchange or entity to hold that for you.
So Grayscale is an entity.
Correct. Yes, I would never give my Bitcoin to Grayscale.
My son and I argued about it.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's about convenience, right? And the funny thing is that on your phone, you can easily transact all that Bitcoin to your phone pretty easily, and you have full ownership over that. Yes, question?
So if I have Bitcoin and I got it by selling service, not through any agency, and I die, what happens to my Bitcoin?
That's a great question. I like that. So, The question was if you have Bitcoin held on a service, let's say just a Roth IRA, 401k, an exchange, or something like that, and I die, what happens to the Bitcoin? Well, in a service sake, it depends on the service. I think in a 401k or Roth IRA instance, as long as they are abiding by the contract and the law of you putting a beneficiary down, you can transact all of that to someone else's social security number. However, in an exchange's case, I'm not sure what would happen really, because you would have to prove that you're probably a family member of this deceased person. Now, in my case, where I hold absolutely no Bitcoin on any third-party service or anything, I have personally found a way to get my family to recover it based on notes that I've given them and based on what I have in my safe, personally. But I never share the exact key that they need to get all of my Bitcoin right now. So in the case that I died, they can access it. But say I didn't do that. The Bitcoin is gone. Not gone from existence of the network, because it's still there in your wallet, but it will never move ever again. And that's the reality of it. Now, interesting thing about that and the economics of it is that it actually kind of causes deflation in a way. Because if those coins go out of circulation, there's less supply. And less supply will then adjust for the correct price of what the demand should be. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So, speaking of all that, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Now, that seems like a low number, especially being 8 billion people in the world, roughly. 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist, and that is written into the rules of the protocol. That cannot change. Now, Bitcoin is divisible into something called Satoshis. These are like cents for the dollar. And those are divisible by 100 million from one Bitcoin. So one Satoshi currently today is equal to 1,918 10 millionths of a cent. And the cool thing is I can actually transact one Satoshi to any one of you right now if I wanted to. Try transacting that amount of money in the traditional finance system. You can't. It's not possible. So that's just a really cool thing in my mind, is the fact that there isn't necessarily a limit to the divisibility that Bitcoin can go. Because especially when I was talking about with supply, if stuff goes out of circulation, then possibly you may need to even go further along to where like maybe it's 1 billion Satoshis is equal to 1 Bitcoin, but that doesn't change the value of what necessarily Bitcoin is. It just changes, like if I were to extend decimal points after a Satoshi, then it's still worth the same amount. You're just able to transact a lesser amount. So yeah, the beautiful thing about what I was talking about earlier, right, the highest record for a Bitcoin transaction was $1.2 billion, and that was in 2020's terms. Today, that's a lot more money. But it does not matter the amounts of money that you transact. It can be 19, 18, 10 millionths of a cent. It can be $1 quadrillion. It will cost the same exact fee no matter what. And the reason that is because of the size of the transaction in bytes and data. So Bitcoin works on the size in computer storage, not on how much the content actually is. Yes?
So there are 21 million Bitcoin.
Yes,
That's all there ever will be.
correct. Yep. So there are 21,
So who set that in the first place?
yes,
And can that just be reset then again?
Right.
At some point, that needs to be the value.
So the question was, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, correct? And the answer is yes. But could somebody else just change that number and cause 21 million to be, say, 21
Well,
billion.
because someone actually established it.
Correct. Someone did establish 21 million to be the number. Satoshi Nakamoto did that, and is written in the rules since Bitcoin version 0.1. That same exact software can run today and still work on Bitcoin. The reason that cannot change is because if you change that number, it does not abide by the rules of the network. Your transaction will be rejected. So Bitcoin, in a way, is very radical because it's very set in stone of the rules that you have to follow.
Well, who wrote the rules of the internet?
The rules of the internet, written by whatever the standard of what the internet was built on.
My point is that if something is created, it can be changed.
Correct, but that's dependent on the users of the network. Everybody on the network that uses Bitcoin has to unanimously agree to change that number. That will not happen. The reason that will not happen is because there's an incentive to not have that happen, right? Because the wealth that you would have if you inflated the supply like our Federal Reserve does decreases your purchasing power today, right? So that is a cool thing about Bitcoin. Yes, somebody did write the code. That is abstracted power and somebody that wrote that software application for Bitcoin. But to vote in Bitcoin is to run the code. So why I said it's the money of the people is that every single person that runs Bitcoin, the code, and personally I do, I'm one of hundreds of thousands of people across the world right now.
Me too.
Well, there you go,
Yeah,
right.
it's hooked up to the computer.
Oh, perfect, yeah. So if you run the code, you're voting on what Bitcoin is, and you decide that. Now, if you want to go ahead and go fork off of Bitcoin, where we've had Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Algorand, Cardano, all of these other types of altcoins, I could change the code of Bitcoin right now to say 21 billion coins. It's a completely different cryptocurrency. It is not Bitcoin anymore. Because Bitcoin itself will reject all of those transactions that think 21 billion Bitcoin exist. So that is why it's so hard to change and why the decentralized nature of Bitcoin is very important, because there isn't one single person that can just change it. Otherwise, it's not Bitcoin.
Question.
Yes, question.
It's probably an oversimplification, but how would you, I mean, since the supply of Bitcoin is fixed,
Correct.
it'll never change, it'll never go up or down.
Yep.
And think of the supply-demand curve.
Mm-hmm.
The demand seems to affect your value.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so the question was, in terms of Bitcoin's limited supply, the demand for it definitely seems to change your value, correct? That's all in dollar terms today. Yep. The value of Bitcoin that you have never changes, right? And that's the thing, is if Bitcoin were a global reserve currency, you wouldn't have to worry about that, because, you know, the value of me going to the store or going to get gas, I could pay 1,000 Satoshis for gas or something. It might be less than that by that time, but Bitcoin's demand has to skyrocket in terms of a US dollar term today in order for it to be a reserve currency. That is true. But yeah, that works in the theory of supply and demand economics. So Bitcoin is trustless and secure. There is no need for trust in Bitcoin. It is a completely trustless protocol.
If I said I was skeptical, would that surprise you?
No, that doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, the funny thing is, this is a funny thing about going down what's called the Bitcoin rabbit hole, is that everybody starts with skepticism. Then they start to study it, and then you're like, oh, then you start to use it, and then it leads you down to what people call themselves, and myself included, a Bitcoiner. So we live in a world currently where every single person has to be given limited or no access to a system to achieve security. So I work in cybersecurity, right? And usually this pertains to authentication and what permissions you give a user on your system, right? Now, as, say, a credit card user of Chase Bank, obviously I don't have control of Chase Bank, right? If I did, I would be able to do anything I wanted with Chase Bank, right? But I'm only allowed limited functionality of what they've given me with the credit card that I have and any type of other authority they've given me. And that is what we have used as our model to achieve security overall, is limited access to something or absolutely no access to something. So with our current systems, you have to achieve this certain level of trust in order to operate with certain hierarchy or functionality. You have to trust your bank to allow you to use the money in your bank account because realistically, you don't actually own it. Banks are all private entities. They don't adhere to, they adhere to government regulation, but they don't adhere to rules necessarily placed by the government. And if they wanted to go full anarchy, they could completely just shut off access to your bank account. And interestingly enough, just this past week, I'm not sure if anybody saw this, but PayPal released some statement, which turned out to be revoked, but released a statement that based on a certain rule, and I think this pertained actually to politics too, that if you didn't follow a certain rule, they would actually take away $2,500 from your bank account in PayPal, right? And normally I would say with more banks like, say, First Premier or any of those types, they're not going to like come out and just say that type of stuff, but PayPal being a national organization definitely can have authority over that, and the realistic thing about it is that they're allowed to do something like that if they actually wanted to. Our current systems gives any bank or organization full authority to control the way you transact or access your money, and there will likely be a day, I believe, in the United States that we may possibly have full censorship of our transactions or full transparency to the government over our transactions, as they currently do in China with something called central bank digital currencies. Now, the reason I say that is because Biden issued an executive order this year for many different agencies, and including MIT, to study possibly issuing a central bank digital currency within the United States. And that doesn't even stop private entities like JP Morgan, Chase Bank, and any of these things, right, to issue their own digital currencies themselves, where you have tokens that if you use these tokens, they have full control over every single thing that you do with your money. So we mentioned Canada before, right, with the censorship of their money. But Russia is actually another great example. Russia did what they did, attacking Ukraine, right? But my problem with everything of the United States and other global powers deciding to take Russia off of SWIFT, the global financial paging network, basically, it disables any Russian citizen from really transacting with the rest of the world with just our current financial system, right? And they all came together in agreement to kick Russia off of this system. To me, that is inherently wrong, because now every single Russian citizen has no access to doing that, or being able to pull money from, say, their ATMs or anything that was attached to the SWIFT network. And because of that, now Russia has instated their own central banking system just within their country, and they're actually looking for cryptocurrency payments as alternative with transacting oil and energy and all this type of stuff. Now, for Russian citizens, like, obviously I don't personally agree with what Putin has done, but for Russian citizens who have nothing to do with the war or don't support the war, like, I don't think they should just be kicked off of an international payment network just because of that. Ukraine, it's another great example. of actually the benefits of cryptocurrency, and specifically, I say more so Bitcoin, but as Russia swept into Ukraine, many systems from the banks, all the ATMs, and the services went down. Okay, so due to war, they were not able to even transact any of their wealth. And the scarier thing is the fact that if those banks actually were destroyed and the servers that they have all of that data stored on is destroyed, and none of that ledger data is written down of how much somebody has, it's gone. Like, all of that money is just gone. But beautiful thing is that some people actually were able to escape Ukraine into Poland, all with their key to, say, their Bitcoin in their head. So the cool thing about at least Bitcoin is that instead of memorizing some long number, we came up with a way to describe it in 12 or 24 words that you can memorize. Now, not everybody is going to take that to heart of memorizing their 12 or 24 words, because, I mean, that's kind of a difficult thing to do. Personally, I have, so, I mean, I could go anywhere in the world right now, just leave everything behind, and I have all of my Bitcoin with me still, because it lives in my head. And at the moment, there's no technology that can just, take that information out of my brain, right? I don't have my words specifically written down anywhere either, and so that allows, in the case that I lose one of my wallets, which I have right here. This is one of my wallets. The Bitcoin does not actually live on here. This just gives me access to the Bitcoin that I own. If I lose this or this gets destroyed, I still have all the Bitcoin that I own right here in my head, and I'm able to transact it to my phone. Or a USB stick or something, right? It's very, very powerful. So Bitcoin takes away this idea of trust because every participant agrees on a simple set of rules and everybody is equal. It's a trustless protocol, like I said, and I don't have to worry about my transaction being rejected or censored as long as I'm following the rules of the network. Because of this trust and how the network achieves consensus is through something called proof of work and the functionality of that. We will go through what proof of work is, what proof of stake is, another consensus mechanism. And personally, I believe that you can argue that Bitcoin is the most secure software application ever created in mankind. Personally, I've opted out as well. So, in my conclusion, almost all of my money is in Bitcoin. Like I said, I would say 98% of my wealth is in Bitcoin. Whatever I can store in Bitcoin, I do. I don't have that much in wealth. I mean, personally, in fact, of like US dollar terms, I don't own a house. I have a car, but, and when I first put all of my wealth into Bitcoin, it was roughly around, I think, in dollar terms, $45,000. Right now, it's at $19,000. And I don't bat an eye because I don't care about the price of Bitcoin. I care about the technology and the importance of it. This is also, like I said in the beginning, a theological conviction for me. Because for me, when it comes to caring for my neighbor and knowing that if I'm a participant in Bitcoin, I am helping other people in the world also get onto this network of equal opportunity, right? I'm not trying to profit off of the stock market anymore. I'm not trying to profit off of certain things, real estate or any of this type of stuff, and nothing's wrong with that if you do, like, that's fine, but the reason that is just because it's a theological conviction for me, because I have access to these systems that other people don't. I want to participate in an equal system. So later on, if Bitcoin does become global reserve currency, and in my belief, I do think it will, then if we're trading stocks on top of Bitcoin, then sure, like I'll do that. But I know that this class is about Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, but I'll be saving, like I said, a lot of the blockchain, cryptocurrency stuff for the end of the class because there's a lot more to cover before that. Bitcoin is competing to be the money of the world, and it is still incredibly early. Money is absolutely changing, and I think 2022 was a great year example for that, mainly due to what Russia did. Now, Russia's gone on a gold standard, at least in what they say, but I think money, honestly, is going to be changing for better or for worse, no matter what happens with digital currencies going forward. I do not believe that the US dollar, honestly, will be around within the next 100 years. What I've come to learn, say again?
In the next how many years?
Within the next 100 years. It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, I don't know. The reason I say that is because there's one common thing with all fiat-based currencies is that due to greed and due to the control that people have over the supply of that money, all fiat currencies eventually debase all the way to a value of zero. And we see this a lot with hyperinflated countries. Venezuela, Brazil, Turkey, many other countries as well have begun to hyperinflate. Zimbabwe is actually a great example. But what I do know is that it isn't possible for these fiat currencies to survive just based on the economics of them. Now, like I said, I don't know when that would happen. Nobody can tell you when that will happen, but because it is destined to become worthless from debasement, honestly, changing money into a new system, no matter what it is going to be a hard time for a lot of people. Currently, the price of Bitcoin stands around $19,000. I don't care if the price crashed or skyrocketed tomorrow. I'd be happy if it skyrocketed. But I continue to own it, hold it, and use it. And I help people understand Bitcoin because I care about all of the people in the world who are suffering from the system that, honestly, I was blind to, and many people still are. I also care for those that are suffering from corrupt regimes, those who are suffering from our current monetary system, hyperinflation, all this stuff, and the decisions made by just a few people in our central banks in the world and the Federal Reserve. So next week, we will be discussing the history of money, what led to our current system, how our current system operates, how the US dollar has control over the world and corrupted the system, and how Bitcoin limits human greed and fixes the exploitative properties of the current system. So with that, that is all I have for today. You can contact me personally at my email here, and I also have my website right there with a lot of resources pertaining to Bitcoin, cybersecurity, Christianity, and just my social profiles. So I'll open the room up now. Are there any questions? Yes.
I might have this wrong, but I thought in the beginning when Bitcoin first came out, there was a way you could acquire it through data mining. Is that done? I mean, if there's a limited supply of Bitcoin, how could that be?
Yes. So the question was when Bitcoin came out and how it operates now, the way to obtain Bitcoin or mint it was through data mining. And that is somewhat true, yes. So the way that Bitcoin operates is through, at least minting Bitcoin, is through something called proof of work, which I'll get into the discussion of mining a lot more in depth. But yes, Bitcoin is mined. I do mine Bitcoin personally. And the way that this works is that it takes energy, takes real world energy, and it puts that into what I describe as an encrypted energy through a function called SHA-256. So that is SHA-256. This is a cryptographic hashing function that allows all of these participants in the network to basically participate in a random chance vote or random chance drawing of getting to record the transactions into the next valid block. Now, I'll explain a lot of that later, but the reason that people are given Bitcoin for mining is because they expend the energy and the resources to actually get that to record permanently transactions in the ledger, and they are rewarded Bitcoin back for expending that energy. And that's why it's proof of work, because it takes real physics, like laws of thermodynamics and physics, to actually truly produce Bitcoin on the network. And the year that it will be done mining is 2140. And the only reason we know that is due to the fact that Bitcoin mining adjusts its difficulty. So this is a cool thing to limit human greed, is the fact that there is nothing anybody can do to actually produce Bitcoin faster. The difficulty of mining Bitcoin adjusts based on the amount of power of hashing is actually on the network. So the amount of raw computer power. So this adjusts every 2 weeks roughly. So that every single block on Bitcoin, every single block of transactions stays at roughly a 10-minute settlement. And that happens every 2 weeks. That difficulty is adjusted. Based on that, we know that the last bit will be mined 2140. And pertaining to mining, the rewards for Bitcoin halve every 4 years, roughly, every 210,000 blocks. So in 2024, the block reward will not be 6.25 anymore, Bitcoin, 6.25 Bitcoin. It will be 3.125 Bitcoin. And the economics of that makes it to where realistically there would be higher demand. All the way down that it exponentially decreases the amount of block reward given, so that by the year like 2060, you're getting like 1/100,000th of a Bitcoin or something. But just understand that, yeah, every 4 years roughly, it will cut in half. In the chat, we have a question. Please define cryptocurrencies, stablecoins, altcoins. Is Bitcoin considered cryptocurrency or stablecoin or altcoin, or is Bitcoin an entity of its own? So I'll start with, yes, Bitcoin technically is a cryptocurrency. The reason I don't like to lump it in with the marketing term of cryptocurrencies is because that has kind of become its own thing. It is the reason we named it a cryptocurrency to begin with is because it's a cryptographic currency. Stablecoins, Bitcoin is not a stablecoin. Bitcoin is its own thing. But a stablecoin is meant to peg to the US dollar, meaning that there will be X amount of stablecoins for X amount of dollars in supply. And altcoins are just forks off of Bitcoin or other protocols that have been created, such as Ethereum, that are their own entities. And personally, I would say a big definition, or let's see, how do I phrase this? A big difference between Bitcoin and then a lot of other altcoins is the fact that Bitcoin actually is classified as a commodity. And it has absolute scarcity because we know 21 million will ever exist. Other things I would say are securities, like stocks, because a lot of altcoins have venture capitalists behind them or are controlled by a foundation or person. So that's how I would define those terms. And then the next question is, please connect on central bank digital currencies and what the implications are for Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. And yes, I will be definitely commenting more on that in future sessions, but a central bank digital currency is just practically that the government issues a currency like the US dollar, except it's all digital and the fact they know exactly where it's transacted and what it's used for. And I've had this question before with central bank digital currencies and cash. if cash will still exist, I don't believe so. Because I don't believe that you can interact the two different systems together based in digital world and then a cash society. Likely, if we ever move to something like a central bank digital currency, which I am not an advocate for, we would be in a cashless society. And there would absolutely be zero privacy for financial transactions. I will be discussing implications for other things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies later for sure, but yeah. So, any other questions?
Has Bitcoin ever been hacked? Did people lose money?
No. So Bitcoin has actually not ever been hacked. It is the one blockchain that has proven its security throughout the past, 12 years? And there have been bugs with Bitcoin. I won't lie to you about that, but it has not affected people's funds in the way that purposefully people have lost money or had money stolen. But these bugs do not affect the network at all. It's more of just a small fix, like if a website button is not working or something, then that's called a bug. And it's very similar in Bitcoin's terms.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's,
We'll see you next week.
yeah, sounds good.
This is 4 sessions.
Mhm.
We're skipping November 2nd.
Yep, so I will see you all next week, October 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you.